Dexter is easily one of the most popular and talked about shows of all time. It gave us some truly incredible episodes, the kind that stick with you long after the credits roll. But let's be honest, not every episode was a home run. In fact, a few were downright frustrating. So today, we're diving into the worst episodes in the series, the ones that left fans scratching their heads, arguing on Reddit, or just wishing they could unsee it. And we're kicking things off with what might be the most controversial episode of them all. Season 8, Episode 12, Remember the Monsters. Now, finales are supposed to be special. They're meant to give you closure, land that emotional knockout, and bring years of storytelling full circle. This one, well, it did the opposite. Instead of tying things together, it left fans divided, frustrated, and honestly a little betrayed with the cliffhanger. And when you look at what actually happens, it's not hard to see why. On paper, it sounds huge. Deborah is shot by Saxon, left brain dead.
Don't move.
And Dexter makes the devastating choice to pull her off life support.
I would change everything if I could.
He carries her body out of the hospital, sails her into the storm, and lets her sink beneath the waves. Then, in the middle of Hurricane Laura, Dexter drives his boat straight into chaos.
I can't let that happen to Hannah, to Harrison. I have to protect them from me.
Faking his own death. Except, surprise, surprise, he doesn't die. The big final twist reveals Dexter living alone in Oregon, working as a lumberjack with a grim new identity. It's dramatic, sure, but was it satisfying? For most fans, the answer is a resounding no. No thank you. The problem isn't the concept per se. Deb dying or Dexter exiling himself could have worked. The problem was the execution. Characters we'd spent 8 seasons with got little to no closure. Storylines that could have paid off were left dangling. And the lumberjack ending, it felt so random and out of sync with the tone of the show that it quickly became a meme. And deservedly so. I don't need to see Dexter showing up on my paper towels. Fans didn't hold back either. Reviews tore it apart, calling it lazy, rushed, even insulting. Threads are still filled with people debating how the writers could have missed the mark so badly. The biggest complaint is that Dexter's decision didn't feel true to who he was. Instead of the meticulous, careful killer we'd followed for years, this ending felt like the writers scrambling for shock value at the last minute. And that's why Remember the Monsters is remembered as one of the most monstrously controversial episodes in TV history. Instead of honoring the journey, it left things bleak, unresolved, and unsatisfying. To this day, it stands as one of Dexter's least liked episodes, and for many fans, it's the single reason the show went from one of the best crime dramas ever made to a prime example of how to avoid ending a series. Season 8, Episode 11, Monkey in a Box. So, we all know the finale of Season 8 was a major disappointment, but what about the episode right before it? Could it be a redeeming point of the season, or was it just as messy? You'd think by this point the writers would at least know how to build real tension in the penultimate episode of a long-running serial killer show. You'd expect Dexter to be laser-focused, dangerous, every beat to matter, but Monkey in a Box gives us something else, and for many fans, that something else is a frustrating mess. The episode opens with a brutal twist. Evelyn Vogel is murdered by Oliver Saxon, and Dexter witnesses it. Instead of acting decisively, he hides the truth from Batista and Quinn, claiming Vogel came to see him, while letting Saxon roam free. Meanwhile, Dexter is trying to juggle, preparing to flee to Argentina with Hannah and Harrison, while taking out Saxon first. He scrubs evidence, packs his life away, sells his apartment, and scouts Saxon's supposed hideout, all while Hurricane Laura builds outside. We weren't impressed. Dexter's indecision and drift from his usual meticulous, calculating self make him feel weak and hesitant, undercutting the tension we expect from a man who thrives on control. Saxon escapes multiple times, thanks to contrived convenience. A bystander is stabbed, and key moments that should feel earned are absurd, highlighting how plot twists like evidence conveniently appearing or disappearing, or Saxon's multiple escapes feel forced rather than natural escalation. The climactic confrontation tries to deliver suspense. Dexter straps Saxon to his kill table, seems ready to act, but hesitates. Something completely out of character, especially when it comes to a person like Saxon. Just as he wrestles with what to do, Deborah arrives to intervene, only for Saxon to stab Federal Marshal Max Clayton and shoot Deborah before escaping. The chaos is meant to shock, but because the episode rushed the setup and neglected character motivations, the moment lands hollow for a lot of us. Even callbacks to earlier seasons, like references to Dexter's red shirt, Deb's injuries, or Vogel's legacy, feel superficial. They attempt to tug on nostalgia strings, but fail to deliver meaningful emotional weight. The tension is surface level, the drama feels manufactured, and the episode ultimately leaves fans feeling like the story is unraveling instead of building toward a satisfying finale. Monkey in a Box had all the ingredients for an exciting penultimate episode: stakes, character conflict, and the perfect setup for the finale. Instead, it's remembered as a frustrating, sloppy episode that highlights the final season's issues, that being weak plot, character drift, and hollow drama. For many people, this is the moment when the cracks in Dexter's storytelling became impossible to ignore. Season 8, Episode 10, Goodbye Miami. Goodbye Miami is basically a snooze fest disguised as drama. The episode spends most of its time on boring family shit. Dr. Vogel and Oliver Saxon, still terrible, one-dimensional, forgettable. Saxon's supposed to be the big bad of the season, but he's given almost no tension or threat in this hour. Vogel, introduced as a key player in Dexter's world suddenly and conveniently, is wasted here, and by the end, her death barely lands emotionally. Seriously, does anyone really care that she died? Then there's Hannah, never exactly a fan favorite, suddenly taking over the screen. She's all over the place, and much of the episode focuses on her interactions with Dexter and Harrison instead of any real suspense or detective work. And Harrison himself? The poor kid spends half the episode being babysat in situations that are meant to be serious, but just feel tedious. And oh yes, the treadmill scene. Harrison has an accident, and it's executed so poorly, it's almost laughable. The kid suddenly looks like an adult stunt double for a moment, flailing around on the treadmill. You're not on the edge of your seat, you're shaking your head. It's one of those moments where you think, did no one stop to watch this before filming? Did anyone in the editing room not think to themselves, this might not work? It's the perfect example of the sloppy, rushed fill that plagues the latter half of the season. By the end, someone finally dies. At least something happens, right? But it feels like a token gesture rather than a meaningful plot point. The emotional stakes never really hit. The episode is dragging through family drama and side plots that don't matter, so when a big moment does occur, it's hard to feel anything. And that's the kicker. If this was what most of Dexter had been like, the show would probably be remembered as one of the worst dramas in TV history. Slow, melodramatic, and frustratingly bland. It abandons everything that made Dexter compelling, which is the suspense, clever plotting, the delicate cat and mouse between killer and pursuers, instead opting for half-baked soap opera moment. Watching this episode, you can feel the season running out of steam, the beginning of the end. It's like the writers realized they had to set up the finale, but had no idea how to make it exciting or meaningful. Every scene is either padding or awkwardly overstuffed with family interactions. By the time it ends, you're left wondering why anyone would invest so much time in a show that can feel so lifeless just when it should be building excitement. In short, Goodbye Miami is frustrating, slow, and boring. It tries to juggle drama, suspense, and setup for the finale, but it ends up accomplishing very little of that. It's the perfect example of why Dexter's final season struggles so much. Moments that should feel tense or dramatic fall flat. Characters act inconsistently just for the sake of subversion, and the story just drags. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. New Blood Season 1, Episode 10, Sins of the Father. You'd think the writers would have learned how to wrap up a story properly by the time New Blood came around. After all, the original series finale had already gone down in TV history as one of the most disappointing endings ever. The reboot gave us another finale that left all of us divided, frustrated, and honestly kind of speechless. Episode 10, Sins of the Father, was supposed to be the big payoff of the new hyped up Dexter continuation. After an entire season of Dexter hiding in Iron Lake under a new identity, reconnecting with his son Harrison, and trying to keep the Dark Passenger in check, everything comes crashing down. Angela uncovers evidence linking him to the Bay Harbor butcher case. Harrison learns the full extent of who his father really is, and Dexter finally runs out of places to hide. Sounds like a strong setup, right? Deborah died in the original finale, Dexter's in a new environment, his past is catching up with him, and his son is now part of the story. But the way this episode plays out is exactly where people say it completely falls apart. One of the biggest complaints is how out of character Dexter feels. For 8 seasons, we knew him as careful, calculating, always 10 steps ahead. Here, he suddenly makes sloppy mistakes, ignores his own code, and even kills Logan, a good cop who was never on his table, nor deserved it. Fans hated this because it didn't feel earned. It felt like the writers forcing Dexter into a corner just to wrap things up quickly. Then there's the issue of convenience. Evidence magically falls into Angela's lap. Plot twists like the ketamine reveal feel rushed and messy, and storylines that had been building all season either go nowhere or are brushed aside so the show can race to the ending. Outraged fans called it lazy, contrived, and even insulting to longtime viewers. And of course, we get to the finale's big moment. Harrison turns on Dexter, confronting him about breaking the code and becoming the very kind of killer he promised not to be. Dexter accepts his fate and lets Harrison shoot him dead. The problem is, it feels abrupt and quite frankly rushed. Their relationship hadn't been fleshed out enough to make that choice hit with the emotional weight it should have. Once again, another unsatisfying payoff to Dexter's journey. Instead of giving us closure, Sins of the Father left a lot of us asking why they even bothered to bring the show back in the first place. It tried to correct the mistakes of the original Dexter finale by giving Dexter a definitive ending, but in doing so, it broke his character, rushed the story, and left the audience with more frustration than satisfaction. That's why it is considered one of the worst episodes of the entire franchise. It wasn't just a bad ending, it was a second reminder that sometimes, no matter how many chances you give them, the writers just can't stick the landing. Season 6, Episode 7, Nebraska. So we've talked about disappointing finales and penultimate episodes, but let's rewind a few seasons to Nebraska, one of the most criticized episodes of Season 6. Could this one have been a hidden gem? Nope. Instead, it's a classic example of a promising premise gone completely sideways. The episode is centered around Dexter's trip to Nebraska to tie up loose ends and investigate more about the Trinity Killer's extended reach. On paper, this should have been exciting, a road trip with tension and revelations and character development, but in reality, it's a slow, meandering journey that barely advances the plot and leaves us wondering why we're watching it. Once again, fans weren't shy about expressing their disappointment. Many felt that the episode was filler disguised as a story. Dexter's interactions with his brother Brian are supposed to dig deep into his psyche, exploring the cracks and moral dilemmas that define him. But instead, these interactions feel shallow and forced. The intensity that Brian brought as a villain in Dexter's imagination in previous seasons is barely there, and the potential for truly compelling drama between the brothers is wasted. The pacing is another problem. Scenes drag, and the plot seems to circle back on itself without any meaningful progression. Moments that should be tense or revealing feel flat, and the emotional beats fail to land. It's like watching a car idling in the middle of the highway on a road trip. You know, the journey is supposed to go somewhere, but nothing happens. Other storylines, like minor interactions with secondary characters or attempts to connect to Dexter's broader investigation, feel tacked on and inconsequential. We're left with a sense that nothing significant occurs. Even the supposed character development for Dexter is minimal, with his internal struggles barely scratched. By the end, the episode concludes without a strong payoff enough, leaving us frustrated and underwhelmed. In short, Nebraska is a frustrating detour. It had all the elements of a compelling Dexter episode: tension, character exploration, and moral conflict, but instead, it delivers a slow, meandering, and largely forgettable story. For fans who loved the sharp plotting and edge-of-your-seat suspense of earlier seasons, this episode feels like a rare misstep, a reminder that even a great show can stumble when it loses focus. Season 2, Episode 12, The British Invasion. Let's rewind a few more seasons to The British Invasion, the Season 2 finale, to already one of the best seasons, filled with that signature dark humor and some of the most intense cat and mouse dynamics in TV history. But the finale, The British Invasion, is complicated. It should be amazing. We've got Dokes, who caught on to Dexter after so long, Lila spiraling out of control, and Dexter juggling his own moral code with the chaos around him. The potential for an iconic, tension-packed finale is sky high. So what went wrong? Let's start with the biggest problem: Dokes. This entire season builds to a showdown between Dexter and Sergeant Dokes, the one person who consistently threatens to expose him. We were primed for Dexter to finally face that dilemma, whether he could kill Dokes or not. But Lila swoops in and kills Dokes herself, just like that. And let's be honest, that's a massive cop-out. All the moral tension, the careful setup of Dexter's inner struggle evaporates because someone else takes the choice out of his hands. It's frustrating, it undermines Dexter's agency, and it cheapens one of the season's central conflicts. Some even calling out lazy writing and a letdown for a season that had done so much to take Dokes' pursuit feel urgent and personal. Then there's Lila herself. Her manipulations and obsession have been building throughout the season, and while she's a compelling enough character, the episode leans on her too heavily. Some of her actions feel over the top, and a few plot points, like her discovery of Dexter's secret, happen in a way that's convenient rather than earned. Watching her kill Dokes, you can almost feel everyone collectively rolling their eyes at how easily she dismantles one of the most tightly wound plot threads in the entire series. And yet, this episode isn't a total disaster. Dexter finally gets a satisfying kill with Lila. Unlike Dokes, Lila dies at Dexter's hands, and it's intense. After all the chaos she caused, seeing Dexter reclaim control is cathartic for him. It's a rare moment in the finale where the storytelling hits its mark, showing us the dark, calculated side of Dexter that we came for. Still, the episode's flaws linger. Dokes' cheap death robs the finale of one of its most potent conflicts, and way too soon. Lila's over-the-top behavior and the sudden unraveling of key storylines make the episode feel uneven, and some of the suspense falls flat because the resolution comes too easily. Even the satisfying elements, like Dexter killing Lila, can't fully erase the sense that the writers took the easy way out instead of letting Dexter confront his own moral dilemma head on. For example, how the hell do you fly all the way to another country and you work for a police department and no one knows? Suddenly a woman dies and no one connects the dots that you only went to Paris for one day? What the hell? In short, The British Invasion is a mixed bag. It's full of tension and memorable moments, and Dexter finally gets a killer payoff with Lila, but it's also very, very frustrating. It's very uneven, and it just undermines every conflict that made season 2 so compelling. You love the season, but this finale, it leaves you shaking your head and thinking they could have done so much more. Season 6, Episode 8, Sin of Omission. Season 6 of Dexter flirted with fresh ideas and darker stakes, but Sin of Omission is where the show really starts to falter. If you've ever wondered why fans started losing faith in the series around this point, this episode is the perfect example. Between bizarre character choices and a villain who barely registers as threatening, it ends up being more frustrating than thrilling. Let's get the biggest complaint out of the way. Deborah falling for Dexter. Yes, Deb, the sister who spent seasons admiring, hating, and tolerating Dexter, suddenly finds herself emotionally unraveling over him. In this episode, she's practically losing her mind because Dexter isn't making enough time for her, and the show leans into her feelings in a way that's uncomfortable and widely criticized. People have slammed this plotline as one of the series' most egregious egregious missteps. Deborah's character is strong, witty, and determined, yet here she's reduced to a love-struck, irrational mess, all because the writers decided to add a romance element that makes little sense and adds zero suspense. It's melodrama at its worst. Meanwhile, the episode tries to juggle multiple storylines, but most of them land with a thud. Dexter is still investigating the Doomsday Killer, Travis Marshall, who's supposed to be menacing and clever. Instead, he comes across as more of a prop than a threat. The religious angle feels forced, jarring, and disconnected from Dexter's usual amoral, methodical style. The tension and psychological thrill the show once excelled at are nowhere at all to be found. Even Professor Geller, who could have added intrigue as the mentor figure, is barely there, since he's just a figment of Travis's imagination. And what about the rest of the supporting characters? Deb's ongoing feud with LaGuerta gets recycled yet again. Scenes that should feel dynamic instead drag, and the show spends too much time on Dexter's family and personal life at the expense of suspense or genuine drama. The episode limps along, seemingly unsure whether it wants to be a thriller, a soap opera, or a family drama, and ends up doing none of them well. By the time the episode wraps up, there's a strong sense of too little too late. Nothing particularly exciting happens. Travis is still a joke of a villain, Deborah's romantic dilemma is cringe-inducing, and Dexter's world building takes a back seat. It's slow, plotting, and frustrating for anyone who remembers the tight, suspenseful storytelling of earlier seasons. In short, Sin of Omission is a perfect example of why Season 6 often divides Dexter fans. It attempts to shake things up, but does so in all the wrong ways. Deb falling for Dexter is an awkward, unnecessary gamble at best that alienates the majority of its viewers. The villains fail to create tension, and the episode itself trudges along without any purpose, really. For anyone hoping this episode would be a thrilling pivot, it's a clear sign that the season was beginning to lose its way. So that's it for our deep dive into Dexter's duds. From finales that had us scratching our heads to episodes that just dragged, weird plot twists that fell flat, and storylines that totally turned Dexter fans off, these were the moments that proved even awesome shows can mess up. Which episode drove you nuts the most? The one that made you want to yell at the screen or just skip ahead? Blood spatter your thoughts in the comments. I'm all ears. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next one.